Thanks. We're talking with Nina Sampat from Staples Canada. And Nina, before the break, we started to talk a little bit about our recognition. And within most organizations, what gets measured gets done. And recognition certainly ties to that. But talk to me a little bit about, how do you evaluate whether people are engaged in the organization and doing a good job?
So again, I think that at all positions within the organizations, we have performance reviews, and those are done semi-annually. As part of those performance reviews, there's a component that's really around the objectives, and that's where the measurement component really comes in. And then there's a component around kind of conceptual skills, and that's the leadership skills that we're looking for in our leaders. Something that's unique that I think you might be interested in is that with our retail stores, we actually have them create a business plan. Mm-hmm. And as part of that business plan, there's key metrics that the individual stores pick from based on what they feel their opportunity is within their market. So we have a dozen or so metrics that we evaluate our business on, and the stores have the ability to choose a handful of those that they build their business plan around.
So you've as a larger organization said, here are the key measures for us as an organization, and then you challenge the store. Now, who in the store is involved in that decision-making process?
So it's led by our general managers,
okay.
But the management team is part of that. In some cases, the associates are even part of that, where they identify which key elements that they feel that their team wants to go after to really hit their business results for the year. And as part of that, those business objectives that they establish, they build action plans. And they are also tracking those results every period to be able to understand if their actions are actually supporting the right results and they're getting what they need to out of those plans.
What I love about that is the fact that if I interpret what you said right, is that what my store does and the objectives I set for my store, I can clearly see a direct line to what's important to the organization as a whole. So I don't feel like I'm in a vacuum, but I clearly understand that the actions that I take at the store level really are going to have a direct impact on the organization as a whole.
Yeah, they're definitely aligned. But the beauty of it is that we're not necessarily having a structured approach. We have that flexibility for our managers to establish, what are the opportunities within their four walls to be able to drive their business this year. And based on that, they're able to select, key elements that they think they need to go after. And like you said, there's an opportunity for them to really understand what's affecting those results. And a lot of that is sharing best practices as well, because chances are that there's other stores and peers that have those same elements, mm-hmm. and they can learn from those successes. So that's really encouraged and fostered as well as part of this process. So part of those business plan elements that the store selects is part of their performance review, and that really falls in the objective portion as well. So there's a clear understanding of business results as well as individual leadership contribution that each individual is making within the organization.
And how do the folks respond to that? I would suspect fairly favorably, but what's the feedback you're getting?
I think it's challenging because it does take some work, mm-hmm. to build a plan and to work the plan and to evaluate it. And in some cases, some of the most successful stories are when people are trying things and they recognize that it's not delivering the results that it should be. But the beauty of it is that they're building a plan around it, so they really truly understand what they're doing when it's working and when it's not. But at the same time, I think there's definitely accountability and real personal ownership on what they're doing to drive those results. So I think it really depends on the individual, but we really hope that for the individuals that we tend to have in the organization, they thrive on that.
Yeah. Well, you used a couple words there that I really love, because I hear the word accountable all the time. We want our people to be accountable. And I tend to be a little provocative at times, and I will sometimes say to someone, well, I'd rather my people not be accountable. I'd rather they take ownership. And the mm-hmm. reason I see a difference is accountability to me is something that I impose on you. I'm going to hold you accountable. I've created these results and you're going to be accountable to them. I think it's a much more powerful emotion and a much more powerful driver when you create your own objectives and then you take ownership of them. I think, and so I think that's a great way you guys have gone about that.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, sorry to
no, please.
One of our values is really owning it. And part of that is really trying to understand that it's not about, you're going to be kind of held to the fire and you're accountable for getting these results on your own. It's really that that focus around, giving the person the autonomy to be able to run with things and make it their own, and the ability to make things work without feeling that kind of direction of, top-down direction of here's where you need to do, this is how you're going to do it, and this is how it's going to happen.
Yeah, well, I think sometimes when we use accountability, it tends to be used as a bit of a stick. I'm going to beat you up with you're going to be accountable to it. And then you get in that kind of environment, what happens is people sort of say, okay, well, I need to hit 10, and when they hit 10, they stop. But if you've created an objective for yourself that you take ownership of and you hit 10, then you're excited about going to 11 or going to 12. And it changed the dynamic of the way folks work. How does that filter down through the organization? So the general manager has been, and the leadership team in the store has been very involved in that. How does that filter down to the frontline worker, who we all know is really the ones, that deals with the customer?
The way I see it is that our associates are in tune with, what the store's focuses are. The management team are focused on those key elements that they're driving, and they're really working through their associates to make that happen, and driving the right behaviors, giving them the support where needed, and really creating that environment for those action plans to be able to happen, because it really takes the associates to deliver those results. It's interesting that you say, there's those benchmarks that companies have that everyone kind of needs to live up to. The interesting thing about our business plans is that the stores set their goals, and all we ask for is that there's continual improvement year over year. So we do have a threshold that we want stores to be able to meet, but there isn't this top goal that we've established for every store to achieve in these elements. It's really based on their own individual store, and the objective is to continually improve. So they're setting those goals. There's a tendency for people to be creative, but be honest and not look for shortcuts to achieve those results. And I think the more and more that we continue to instill that in results that we focus on, I think that's where we'll really see the success. I think there's times where you have a measurement within an organization and you want everyone to just hit this number, but realistically, there's people who will look for ways to take shortcuts and just to get that number. And I think that's where you're shortchanging really the true potential in what you're going after when you establish such goals. So again, I think it's unique where we let our stores set those goals, and the only criteria is that we want them to continue to improve, and set it based on year-over-year improvement.
Well, you touched on something that I like to call a balanced scorecard. And what I mean by balance is everybody seems to be very good at measuring that, did you hit this number? Did you hit this number of things? They're very financial driven and very numbers driven. It's much more difficult sometimes to measure the soft side of the equation. And, your point is if you've been told, here's the number you've got to hit, you may find shortcuts. And those shortcuts don't necessarily have sustainability. Or those shortcuts may end up not being the best thing for the customer, or may not be the best thing for the people on the team. So do you look at both sides of that equation, so to speak, the what I call the balanced scorecard?
We do, and I think we challenge ourselves every day. I think there's there's measurements within the organization where we feel that we're at risk, and there's an opportunity for us to be doing the wrong thing, and we really look at what's causing that wrong behavior, because ultimately our results are to support our customer interaction and our experience with our customers. So the last thing we want to do is really to create an environment where that happens. But honestly, that does exist, and I think that the good thing is that we do recognize it, and we continue to work towards trying to, eliminate that from being the focus or the kind of the push that's coming from the leadership.
Right. Well, and I think that where the customer fits within the organization really has a huge impact on that kind of thing. Is the customer fully embedded in the strategic plan, or are other things driving it? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that it'd be silly of us if the customer wasn't really our end in mind. It really has to be about the customer, and really we work back from there and say, what do we need to do to really be able to deliver our vision for our customers. And so yeah, they're at the forefront of what we look at and how we do things, and any initiatives or priorities that we place within the organization.
Well, that's great. Well, after the break, maybe we'll chat a little bit more about how the customer fits within the organization.